just myself experiencing 30 years ago war. I know that wars do bring certain kind of strain and drain, and they change us. They represent a challenge.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask you about, knowing now that Ukraine has been under the Russian aggression for 2 years, what have been the spiritual and theological challenges for you as a Christian leader? But you can also maybe speak within the context of a Christian community and the community of Christian leaders.
The war itself is going on for 10 years, but we are talking about the full scale war is just in 2 days we will mark the 2 years. And I've been directly or indirectly involved in a war since 2015. We would regularly travel to the front line. We would work there with the soldiers. We would work there with the people, with those who have suffered from the war. So there was a kind of understanding of what Ukrainian war looked like. But it was just at the edge of the two regions in the eastern part of Ukraine, which is Donetsk region and Lugansk region. But then 2 years ago, in February of 2022, the war changed drastically. It was a full invasion. We did not, in our worst scenario, we did not envision and or anticipated that scale would take place in our country. I decided then, even prior to the full invasion, because there were chats and conversation back and forth, who will do what if these things will happen. But then, even when we were kind of trying to envision what may happen, none of us had that kind of understanding that they will come from northern part of Ukraine, from the Belarus land. They will invade not just from the Russia, but from the Belarus as well. Because we are located not just in Kyiv, but in the north part of Kyiv, which means that in our nearest distance, we have no direct border with Russia. So we thought that we were in a kind of safe zone, and that if that invasion will take place, and it will be a massive or a full-scale invasion, we would thought that it would be, of course, from the eastern part of Ukraine, and they will try to break in from those regions that they were occupied since the 2014. And then, of course, they will try to get the southern part of Ukraine because they wanted to have inland way to get to Crimea. But none of us, we were just recently reading all three scenarios we have prescribed before the war, what we will do in scenario A, what we will do if scenario B will take place. And then there was a scenario C, which as we write, we laugh. And we thought, well, this will never happen. Well, exactly the C scenario took place in our situation. And it was even worse than we described it in that scenario. So we were all taken by surprise, and we had to act well. Everybody acted according to his knowledge, his experience, life experience. And of course, we realized that different people deal differently with these kind of stresses. Some people just could not take it. Some people would take it with a certain amount of panic. Some people would take it with uncontrollable panic. And then the less people would try to, kind of stay reasonable in that kind of situation. So we were all taken by surprise. That was the first shock. Then the second thing was that we thought that this kind of war with this intense dynamic cannot last long. So there was this illusion that, well, it may end soon. somehow we wrongly thought that something may happen to Putin. We wrongly thought that all this sanction imposed on Russia will have a kind of quick effect on their economy, on their military factories, and that they will not be able to get all the details that they need for the military build up and things like that. None of it happened. So now we are, and I put it jokingly recently. I said, if back then, when I was writing on a Facebook this diary, War Chronicles, and I'm glad that I quitted it quite soon, because otherwise we are today 729 days into a full-scale war with a high intensity. And if someone would told me back then that it will last 2 years, and now even after 2 years we have no idea when it will end, it would just drive me crazy. So I like to say to my students that hope is in our ignorance of our future. So when we do not know our future, that's where the hope lies. If we would know what the future holds for us, we would have either instant heart attack, or we would not just take it. So that was the second one, was this hope that it will end soon. And then the mood, and now I am talking about collective mood and the mood of the people in the churches, drastically change from the one that we had on the new year from 2022 to 2023. We were all hopeful. We all follow all these prognoses of political and military experts, and everybody knows that it will end in the spring of 2023. Then they said, no, it will end in August after our counter-offensive operation. Then someone would say, no, it will end in September or October. Well, the mood on the new year eve from 2023 to 2024 was exactly the opposite. Now, no one was ever hoping that it will end soon. We came to a very sober kind of understanding that this war will last longer than we initially thought. It will cost us even more than it already cost us. And who knows what the future holds for us. And this mood from hopefulness that this will end soon change into something that we now have no prognosis when it will end. We have no experts who would dare to predict that this will end either in 2024 or even in 2025 or in 2026. So in my New Year sermon, I jokingly put it. I said, well, now I hope it may end soon, because nobody knows anymore. No prognosis. No experts are trying to, affirm us that it will end this time or this time. And I said, well, I think that whenever we give up on prognosing, there is a space for God to intervene. So I hope that because now we give up on everything, like hoping that it will end soon, or hoping that someone will do something for us and it will help us to end it soon. We give up on the idea that it will end the way we initially hope it will end. Now we understand that even if there will be negotiations, these negotiations will be tough ones, and we will not be in a better position to negotiate for it. So now we are kind of slowly coming to a two possible kind of trajectory of possible development. First one, because we end up hoping for prognosis, something may happen. And I've said from the beginning that the war will end. I know how the war will end. It will end instantly, but I don't know when. But if you study the history of wars, all wars end instantly. Nobody knows when. And as all the war theorists would say, there is a plan for war before the first rocket is launched. Then everything goes, pure improvisation. So that's the first trajectory, that it may, a black swan may come, may land in the Russian land, and something may happen. The second trajectory, which is more for us kind of unpleasant to realize, is that it may last longer than we are ready. Therefore, we have to, although we are already in fatigue, we are already exhausted, but we now come to realization that we need more energy to last longer than we initially thought. So there is this two kind of sobering possible trajectory that we are at the moment thinking how we can stay resilient to the reality that we are facing, and how the churches who've been so active in helping and ministering 2 years ago, 1 year ago, at the moment when they are all tired, emotionally exhausted, humanitarian, in terms of humanitarian aid, they have nothing to help anymore, how we can keep going at the moment. And that's, I think, is the most serious challenge that we are facing at the moment. Now, I'm not taking into consideration, a political side of the issue, a corruption that is taking place, a global political dimension of it, when the West is trying to play their game, and in US they are trying to play their game, and we understand that we are hostages of this pre-elective season in US, and we are the hostages of who will save us in a better way, Democrats or the Republicans, and what it will cost us, especially in the light of the people dying on daily basis in the Ukraine and paying this high price. So I'm not going even there, but there is this dimension as well, which impacts us directly here on the ground.
And I would like us to hold this thought for a moment, because I would like you to elaborate a little bit more about, okay, now coming from the very spiritual dimension, pastoral dimension, theological dimension, what you and your colleagues are doing at this time to help the people at this time of the fatigue. But I will interject a question, since we are talking about describing the situation. I know that you have worked and lived and studied in Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina for a number of years. During the war that we had, I say we because I'm from Croatia, that we had 30 years ago, and also immediately after the war. Could you make any kind of comparisons? Did this war in any way prepare you for what you are to face? Or you soon realize that this is a completely different story?
Well, this is a good question. Well, I've spent 5 years in Croatia during the war, and I spent 7 years in Bosnia and Herzegovina right after the war. So I have this war and post-war experience of this, I would call it Balkan tragedy in the early 90s. But then you don't know, I worked for 15 years as a peace building coordinator in many conflicting countries in Central Asia. So I've been through different kinds of war conflicts in a different situation. I mean, I was part of the Kyrgyz-Uzbeki conflict on the southern border of Kyrgyzstan, and I was a part of the conflict between Tajik and Kyrgyz and other conflicts. I've been traveling to all conflict countries in order to exchange the experience how to and what to do in the conflict situation. And so to an extent there are parallels, because war is war, and there are things that are repeating. But I will tell you that to experience war in a different country or in a foreign country, and to experience war in your own country, that's what makes it different. Yes, you have a sympathy, and maybe if you're good enough, you may have empathy to people who suffer when you visiting foreign countries. But that's something different when you see how your country is ruined, how your people are killed, and then the circle gets narrow. How your relatives are killed, how people from your church are killed, how people from your direct family are killed or suffering the war, and it changes your perspective. I would not say 360 degrees, but 180 degrees for sure. So the perception of it is different. And that's what I experienced since the full-scale war. I would even say that when I was traveling to the eastern part of Ukraine since 2015 up to 2022, that was a different, because you are coming back to a normal Kyiv, and that's what makes these people crazy about, because they said, well, there is war in the country, and look how the Kyiv enjoys life, enjoys restaurants, nightclubs, and the young people are walking. So, and that's changed. When Kyiv was bombed, when Kyiv, not Kyiv itself, but they came close to Kyiv to be occupied, and the Kyiv region was occupied, and I couldn't get to my church because it is outside the Kyiv. And all the bridges were blown up by our military, so that we would prevent Russians to came into the city. So that is a different. But you had another part of your question. Did it prepare me? Yes, it did prepare me, and I am thankful to God that I had that experience, because I see how my colleagues, how my people in the church, they would take war slightly different than I would take it. I would take it very soberly and emotionless. I know that these things happen, and I just published a paper recently where I struggle with these three Jesus statements. First, there will be wars. Second, blessed are the peacemakers. And the third statement, I did not bring peace but sword. And how do we play with these three statements? And I said that if we place it into a proper perspective, there is no contradiction. There is exactly the opposite, the holistic kind of understanding of what the church's role in the midst of the world conflicts should be. And I play in this article. I said that on the one side, I always wonder why Christians are so horrified by war, because Jesus warned us about that. He says that there will be wars. And I even asked myself in that article, I said, can I recall a day of my life that there would be no war? No, I cannot. I cannot recall. I lived a bit on this earth, and I cannot recall a single day from the moment I can recall life that there would be no war somewhere. Yeah, they might be on a more distance, closer, they may have direct impact on me or indirect impact on me, but I cannot recall it. Then the second thing, I cannot recall that any aggressor would ever say that I am committing a war. I am going to kill, I am going to rape, I am going to loot, I am going to ruin. No, he would say, I'm going to deliver, I'm going to save, I'm going to help people, I'm going to liberate people, because they don't know what they should be liberated from. So, and then I go into this, in this article, into the political understanding of war and theological understanding of war. And here I come to the last part of your question. And that is, I just recently preached on Nahum, Prophet Nahum. And I think that he is the most relevant prophet now at this moment in my life. And what he does say in the first chapter, he called God, that God is a full of revenge, that he is a God who is full of anger, but still, then Nahum would say that his anger is controllable and his revenge is long patient. And I said to my people, I said, that's what I don't like about him. Because as a representative of a small minority, because if you take Nahum on the full scale, I said there are two small prophets that has to do with the Nineveh. First is Jonah. Jonah refused to give hope to the Nineveh, and Nahum gives hope to small Judea in the face of anticipating collapse of the Nineveh. So what Nahum says? Well, the God is full of revenge. For whom? For the righteous people, for the good people? No, for the good people, he is good God, and he is a shelter, or he is a place of refuge for them. But for the evil people, for the aggressors, he is full of revenge. He is an angry God, but his anger is controllable. That's what he makes him better than any king on earth. His revenge is long patience, and that's what I like as that's what I don't like as a representative of a small nation, because I would like his anger to be instant. I would like his revenge to be immediate, especially to those who cause the suffering of the small country. And I said, well, I didn't pay the parallels, but I hope that people would, as they listen, they would see the parallels between what the prophet Nahum wants to say. So yes, now are we still hopeful? Yes. Does our hope is a challenge? Yes. Is there a fatigue? Oh yes. Is there emotional exhaustion? Oh yes. But how we should go on? Well, Nahum still helps us. Before he described in a very beautiful, poetic way what will happen to Nineveh, he says, Judah, prepare for the festival. And when you are called to prepare for festival, for celebration, in the light of immediate insecurity or immediate danger for you, you say, well, how can I be hopeful? Well, I said the logic of the prophet is not that you have to be hopeful when you see the reality. No, you have to be hopeful where there is exactly the opposite reality, but you learn to trust to God that this reality is coming. How long it will take that this reality will be realized, that's another question. And that's what we now are trying, well, at least in my church, to my people, I'm trying to say that, you know what, there is a hope. And that's why I like the name of your program, Dun Spiro Spero, until my last breath. There is no other options, I hope. Until I breathe, I hope. That's what it means. And that's what I said. Well, and what other options I have apart hoping? Well, there is no other options. So yes, now we have to go back to this prophetic literature and try to see that, well, sometimes God promises us, but these promises are not realized or fulfilled in our understanding of time. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes Yeah, sometimes it costs us more than we initially thought. But what are the options then?
So maybe we can now talk about this hopeful side, more hopeful side that you have already mentioned. I remember at the beginning, I was following, and I'm still following you on Facebook, and I still vividly remember how on a daily basis you are coming with your journal,
Yeah.
and there was some energy in it and hope. And then at one point, those journals stopped.
And
During that period of time, we could learn from
yeah.
your journals about what you are doing and what your colleagues are doing. During that time, I was learning about you and your connection with Bucha and how you were helping the citizens of Kiev, how you were also helping those who were in the military. So there was this sign of hope, regardless of the intensity of the atrocities and the aggression. How you're doing now, 2 years later, yourself and your colleagues, to
Mhm.
build that hope within your community, your churches, but also community at large. For example, I've just given one illustration, if I've picked it up correctly. I've seen somewhere that you and your colleagues are involved now also academically by offering classes and
Yeah.
courses, helping
Yeah.
Christian pastors to actually handle the whole situation and actually give the hope to people.
When you are going through a war situation, when you are going through a traumatic experience, when this general trauma adds to your experience some personal tragedy, as in my case, what you do, you are trying to keep yourself busy so that you would not drive nuts, you would not end up psychologically insane and so on and so forth. So what I was trying to do all this time, I was trying to keep myself busy inventing things. So we even invented at our school a short-term program which is called Mission in the Times of War, where we decided that many pastors, and we did we offered this program as a response to in-depth interviews with many pastors and leaders, evangelical leaders in Ukraine, and we asked them what kind of knowledge, what kind of experience, what kind of advices you would need at the moment so that it would keep you going. So we collected a lot of information, because I said in some interviews that now, in terms of leadership, we have three challenges. We have lack of leaders, um, because many leaders have either disappeared or they have fled the country, and there is no judgment of them. They did what they thought it was right for them, for their family, for the sake of their children to do. They left the country. The second country is that we have a current leaders who are at the verge of burnout, or who are at the verge of being emotionally exhausted, and they are so tired they don't know what to do, and the needs of the churches and of the society doesn't get less, it gets bigger. So you have a lot of needs and less energy to meet these needs, and less resources to meet these needs. So that's a second challenge in the leadership. And then there is a third challenge in the leadership. Yes, thanks God, we have young people who are willing to replace these people, but they have no knowledge, no experience, no resources to do that whatsoever. So we decided how to these challenges that I just lay out in front of you, how we can, as a theological institution, offer something. Of course, you cannot offer them a full-scale formal theological education for 4 years, a bachelor degree, a master degree. It doesn't work. You have to offer them something that they can take, being involved in all sorts of ministry and humanitarian projects and whatever, and each cannot last long enough. It should be something very short, very practical, and it should answer all those challenges, needs that leadership in the churches, leadership in NGO organization, leadership in volunteers organization, leadership in mission agencies are needing. So we decided to have this short-term program, which we deliver on Friday evening and Saturday till late afternoon. And this program offers 4 directions, or it consists of 4 parts. First part has to do with the Bible, hermeneutics, and all these difficult war stories in the Bible, how we are to understand them, how we are to interpret them. And for example, I teach a course on this program, how do we read the Sermon on the Mount in the times of war, with all these Jesus's radical statements that he said in this sermon, and how we are to understand it, how we are to interpret it, and then how we are to preach it. Because most of the pastors, they would quit to preach because they said, we don't know what to preach. And we are tired, and we not just don't know what to preach, we have nothing to say to people in this kind of situation. So there is this first track. How do you deal with the Bible, with these stories, with the radical statements of Jesus? How do you interpret them? How do you understand them? How do you preach about them? And how do you preach it in a way that you encourage the people to remain resilient and to keep going in the situation as we are? Then there is a second track, which is a history. Well, we learned that so many Ukrainians have no knowledge of Ukrainian history. And we have no knowledge that this kind of situation repeats itself constantly throughout our history. So what should we know today about our past that we would take another road which would bring us to a different future, so that we would not go in this vicious circle round and around and around and around? And the history became a very interesting track in this program. Then we have this third track. Okay, but what is the church's mission in the times of war? A practical thing, not a theoretical, not theological, not profound, a very practical. How does the church should serve to replaced people, to those who have been refuged, but they would like to connect online to their church services? Does the church still has responsibility for them? How do we minister to those families that are separated by war? And there are millions of families. There are millions of divorces taking place at the moment among the people, because the wives with children in Europe, he's fighting on the front line. There is no communication. Children are 2 years without their fathers. They have forgot them, even especially when we are talking about the small children. So what do we teach? How do we help? How do we minister to these kind of people? Then there are churches in occupied territory. How do we maintain a relationship with them? How do we nurture them spiritually? Do we still have to do that? Or we just to give up on them and forget about them? Then how do we minister to the churches that are next to the front line? And then how do we minister to those churches who are into the land in more or less safe zone, but they are overwhelmed with the internally displaced people? So, there are so many issues, practical issues, that this war brought up for all of us, and we have no knowledge, no experience, what to do with these kind of people. Then what to do with the churches in terms of legislation in occupied territory, in temporary occupied territory. If they want to start the new church, how to do legally, rightly, and so on and so forth. So then there is this, the mission of the church is a third track, and then the fourth track is this judicial kind of knowledge that the pastors should know. Those who are drafted into the army, if they are drafted against their convictions, how to behave. These are very practical issues. And then more so is how do we minister to the people who've been traumatized, who have lost something or someone, who have been through a horrible rape or things like that. So this is more a kind of psychological ministry to the people. So these 4 tracks, and that's what we give to our students. And we are launching this Friday a 3rd group of the students. So we already had 3 cohorts of people, and we would always have 20, 25, up to 30 people on this program. And these are the active pastors. These are those who have been in ministry, but now during this war, they have faced with the issues and challenges. They have no knowledge, no experience, and they don't know how to react, how to help the people, how to serve the people, and things like that. So we did this. Then we have also offered a program with, we call it first psychological aid, how to help people who have been through trauma or who have this traumatic experience. So we have trained all these people, all these church activists. Pastor cannot do everything, pastor cannot help everyone, and he sometimes needs help as well. So we also train a group of these social workers or church activists who can minister directly to those who've been traumatized. So this is one of the way I just answer your question, how we as an educational institution decided that we can, because we have resources, because we have accumulated knowledge, a certain knowledge, we have lecturers, and that's how in a very practical way we can serve to the church. And that's what we do. That's what we do since the end of the 2022.
When you think of yourself, and when you place yourself in a position, say 2-3 years ago, when you take into account the whole experience of this war over the last 2 years, and you have also mentioned you had some personal tragedies in your life. You lost your wife just before the war, and you lost your son in the middle of the war. How has your spiritual journey been when you look at yourself back and now? Are you in any way different? Do you see even theologically things maybe different, somewhat different than maybe 3 years ago?
I am a different, and I hope I am a different in a better way. After these 3 years, and yes, I buried my wife in 2021. I buried my son in 2022, and I buried my mom in 2023. So I had these 3 years in a row when I have lost loved ones. These were my closest ones, and of course, it impacted. It was an additional tragedy upon our collective national tragedy. And the question that I was asked the most often is, how do I keep going? And the answer to this question is, I don't know. And I'm honest. I don't know how I keep going, because to experience grief upon a grief upon a grief, to experience a tragedy of your country, and being a very organized, highly organized person, unable to plan anything in my life for the last 3 years, because how can you plan anything when you control nothing? So, even I will give you a very practical example. Okay, I planned my trip to Finland since last year. Okay, everything is negotiated, everything is done, tickets are purchased, but only yesterday, late in the evening, I got permission to leave the country. So everything you do, you take a leap of faith. You just plan it. but you control nothing. And you know what? This last week, Monday, I came to office, I can do nothing. I just cannot concentrate on anything. And I realize how all this waiting for something you do not control, hoping for something you don't know what will happen, how it just it adds to your nervousness, and you don't know what's the cause of this nervousness. Okay, yesterday I got my permission. Now, if you follow the news, you know what's taking place on Ukrainian-Polish border. It's blocked. So now it's another nervousness. Well, I have permission to leave the country. Will I be able, because I have tickets from Warsaw to Helsinki to fly this coming Sunday? Will I be able to get there? Will I be able to get there on time? It just adds so many things. So I would say that when the war breaks into your life, all the things you take for granted become a matter of miracle, I mean, very basic things. I've been traveling so much. I've visited more than 70 countries. Some countries I visited over hundreds of times. And I was taking for granted that I can always get a taxi, get to the airport in Kyiv, get in few hours wherever I need, for example, to Amsterdam. Before it would take me a few hours and I'm in Amsterdam. Now it will take me 3 days to get to Amsterdam. And I recall my Balkan years, how this traveling logistics, war would destroy everything you get used to. So now I'm going through these things again. So traveling logistic is broken completely. You have to find your way to plan how you will go and travel somewhere. Then it adds time, it adds money, it adds nervousness, and it adds that you're never sure and you feel insecure as you travel all these roads. So that's just one of the example. And it everything adds to national tragedy, your personal tragedy. And then I'm just hoping, Tihomir, that when this madness will end, that I will not just suddenly collapse. But it may happen. Because I just keep myself, when you are in a dangerous situation, you kind of get yourself together, and you just keep going. But the question that my friends keep asking me, and I start to ask myself, what will happen when you are not in a dangerous place anymore? And I'm afraid that I may collapse. I may just collapse. So hopefully I will have friends next to me then as well as I have them today. But yes, friends would help. In my case, I like solitude. I like solitude when I allowed God to talk to me. I somehow begin to prefer more in a prayer, not when I talk to God, but when He talks to me, when I have a privilege to listen to Him. And that's happened very well in a place of solitude. But you notice that the most honest answer is I don't know. Yeah.
I believe you. And that just affirms one thing that you mentioned, is that when everything is over, you will need to be surrounded by friends.
Yeah.
You will need to be surrounded by friends. Although for the most of the war that we had in Croatia and Bosnia, I was there. And my experience, I don't believe, was nearly as intense as yours. But I do remember situations, for example, going to Bosnia as a humanitarian. And I remember it now, when it took us like 2 days to get to Sarajevo, passing through 18 or 20 checkpoints.
Yeah.
And somehow I called it like the Holy Spirit adrenaline works. You are not even aware where you're going through. It comes to you later.
Yeah.
It comes to you.
Later
30 years later, two or three situations that I think that I had a close encounter, I'm thinking, my goodness, I don't know today would I be able to to deal with this. So you will need to have a friends around you, and I believe you will have them. I would like to ask you one more question, and this relates with the attitude of Christians from outside Ukraine, and especially from the Western countries, beginning with the United States of America and the Western Europe and so on. It seemed to me, maybe I'm wrong, it seemed to me that at the beginning, when we all were shocked with the intensity of the aggression, Russian aggression against Ukraine 2 years ago, that there was this feeling that at least some moral, spiritual support was coming from everywhere by simply promising prayers and saying we are with you and so on. And how is this now, from your experience, looking from your experience, how is this now? Do you have a feeling that, and I'm talking about Christian communities now, not secular communities, Christian communities in other countries. How is it now? Do you feel that the interest is still there, or we have forgotten about all of you? We too have got tired somehow. How do you see us from your perspective?
Well, that's a flip side of the protracted war. When the war is takes long, people get tired of it. People get tired of looking at these horrible pictures all the time. People are tired of this suffering, and we are not offended on those who have lost interest in Ukraine, because that's a natural thing that happens to people. There are many other things that distract people: Gaza, Palestine, Israel. Then people have personal struggles. People have their immediate needs, their immediate problems and challenges. So that is okay. Then I think that just to follow the illustration with the Ukrainian-Polish border, you see, in the beginning, Poland was the first country who have welcomed us, who have helped us. And whenever I am outside the country, the first thing I do, I thank people. I just thank people. I've been last year. I've been to Scotland, to England, to US, to Brazil, to other European countries. And I remember how I've spoke in a Baptist church in Oxford, and the pastor came to me with tears. He said, we thought that you will share some horrible stories with us, and you came up behind the pulpit and started to thank us. And I said, well, that's what I do every time I'm outside the country, because I want people to know how much we appreciate the help, not necessarily humanitarian, financial, but prayer help. The fact that you have force your government to do something, not just humanitarian in a humanitarian way, but in a military way, and so on and so forth. And now you can see how Poland changed. Now, instead of helping us, they block us. They block our wheat and things like that. And we understand that. And we have no offense on anyone, but yes, it did change. And we understand that, because we understand that if this war keeps going for another year, or God forbid for 2 years, well, I don't know who will be interested in Ukraine then. And the horrible thing is that the ruins will be still there. And I am not just talking about physical ruins, building ruins. Life ruin will be there. And who will have interest then to help us? I have no idea. So we understand on the one side that yes, people get tired of protracted war. But on the other side, we just want them to know that whenever this help was very active and intense, we progressed. We progressed military. We saw the light at the end of the tunnel. And when that interest, that help, that intensity decrease, we experience it here. So would I ask them to keep standing with us? Yes, if that is possible. I cannot force people to do what they do not want to do. But if I can invite people to be a part of our story, because I think that we cannot lose in this story. Because if we lose this story, this is an existential war. If we lose this story, then all these liberal democratic values, they have no values. All that good things that we are all hoping and now paying a very high price for it will turn to be senseless. And that's what I hope will never happen. Well, if that will happen, then I will be one of those who will be deeply disappointed by everything we believed and we pursue in our life. But let's hope it won't happen.